What if Deku awakened ancient vampire king Bloodline and created breeding harem with Momo, Toga, Midnight and all MHA girls? Chapter 1, Blood Awakening. The night before the UA entrance exam, Izuku Midoriya died. Not for long. Not permanently. But for 90 seconds, his heart stopped, and in those 90 seconds, something sleeping in his blood woke up hungry. It started with the training. Same as every morning for the past 10 months, Dagoba Beach, his body already passed what most people would consider a reasonable limit, hauling debris and running and pushing until his muscles screamed. All Might had been with him for the early session, watching, correcting form, the skeleton of the man he used to be still carrying that impossible warmth. But All Might had left at 9, and Izuku had kept going, because that's what Izuku did. He kept going until there was nothing left. Except tonight he found out there was a threshold past, nothing left, that he'd never crossed before. He was lifting the rusted hull of an old truck, maybe 2 tons, maybe more. He'd stopped keeping precise count weeks ago, when he felt it. Not a snap, not a tear. More like every system in his body hitting a wall simultaneously. His vision went white. Then black. He was on the ground before he registered falling, and his heart, which had been hammering at 160 for the past hour, simply stopped. The silence in his chest was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. Darkness. Cold darkness, the specific kind that isn't a temperature but an absence. Izuku was aware of himself being somewhere that wasn't the beach, wasn't anywhere, and there was something else in that nowhere with him. Not a presence exactly. More like a pressure. Like standing too close to something massive that you can't see. Then a sound, not a sound, a vibration, something that bypassed his ears entirely and went straight to his bones. Deep. Patient. Ancient in a way that made the word ancient feel inadequate. His blood moved. That was the only way to describe it. Like every cell in his body simultaneously remembered something that had been forgotten for generations, and the remembering hurt, burned, rewired. He felt himself unmade and made again in the span of a breath that wasn't a breath because he wasn't breathing, and then, his heart slammed back into rhythm. Izuku jackknifed upright on the beach, gasping, hands in the sand. The stars above him looked different, sharper, closer, like someone had turned up the resolution on the sky. He could hear the ocean 300 meters away and it sounded like it was right next to him. He could smell salt and rust and the city beyond and, beneath all of it, something he didn't have a word for yet. He looked at his hands. They looked the same. Then he stood up, and they weren't the same, because he was looking at his hands from a height that wasn't right. He found a piece of reflective metal in the debris around him and held it up. Taller. His eyes were doing something strange, a rim of deep crimson around the irises, visible even in the dark, because apparently now he could see clearly in the dark. Okay, he said out loud, and his voice came out steadier than it had any right to be. Okay. That's new. He flexed his right hand. Felt the familiar electric hum of one for all in his cells, but different. Usually it felt like trying to run a power line through a garden hose. Now it felt like the hose had been replaced with something that could actually handle the current. The power settled into him instead of fighting him, and when he let a small percentage flicker through his legs, he covered 50 meters in a blur without a single crack in his bones. He stood in the new location, breathing hard, less from exertion and more from the shock of it. Then the hunger hit him. It wasn't like being hungry for food. It was older than that. It came from somewhere beneath his stomach, beneath his chest, from the center of him where his blood circulated, and it said, in terms that weren't words but were absolutely clear, feed. Izuku bit his own arm without thinking about it. His canines were sharper than they used to be, sharp enough, and the tiny wound healed in 4 seconds. The blood that touched his tongue tasted like power. Like something electric and dark and deeply, deeply alive. He stared at his healed forearm. What did you do to me? He asked the night, or whatever had been in the darkness with him. The night didn't answer. But somewhere in the back of his mind, in that space that hadn't existed before tonight, something settled like a king taking a throne. He walked home. He went to sleep. He woke up 4 hours later, ate everything in the kitchen, and went to take the UA entrance exam. The exam hall was chaos, and Izuku moved through it like he'd been doing this his whole life. He'd been at the exam site for 20 minutes before it started, just standing in the crowd of nervous applicants and listening to them. Their heartbeats. The elevated pulse rates, the stress breathing patterns, the ones talking too loud to cover their anxiety. He could hear all of it with a clarity that should have been overwhelming and instead felt completely natural, like he'd been working with earplugs his whole life and someone had finally pulled them out. He felt eyes on him. Turned and found a girl with brown hair and round cheeks staring at him with the guilty expression of someone who'd been caught, and she immediately looked away, her face going pink. Her heartbeat ticked up about 15 beats per minute. Ochaco Uraraka, he thought, though he didn't know her name yet. She looked kind. The exam started. Izuku went to work. The battle robots went down fast. Not because he was being reckless, he was precise, calculated, using the full-body enhancement of 1 for all at percentages he'd never been able to sustain before without destroying himself. 20% felt effortless. He pushed to 30 without his arm even tingling. His enhanced senses let him track 6 different robots across 300 meters of the mock city simultaneously, processing their trajectories and threat levels in a way that felt like simple math rather than desperate calculation. He took down 14 villain-type robots in 11 minutes without a single broken bone. And then the zero-pointer arrived. In the crowd he could hear the panic, screams, stampeding feet, rescue points forgotten in the face of a 15-meter metal nightmare. He was already running toward it because of course he was, that part of him hadn't changed, the part that ran toward things that were going to hurt him. He heard a heartbeat spike. Cut through the crowd sounds, found it. The girl with the round cheeks, Ochaco, her foot was trapped under rubble and the zero-pointer's shadow was falling over her and she was trying to activate her quirk on the rubble but the angle was wrong and she couldn't get enough contact. Izuku hit 1 for all at 50%, felt it sing through him like music, and crossed the distance in a second and a half. He pulled her free from the rubble, one arm around her waist, and set her down 10 meters clear of the impact zone. The moment of contact, her hands gripping his arm, his hand against her back, sent a pulse through him. Something vampiric, something he didn't understand yet, reacting to her warm blood and her warm heart and the genuine light that radiated off her even terrified. She looked up at him with wide brown eyes and he felt her surprise at his height, his physicality, the strangeness of his crimson-rimmed eyes. Run, he told her, and he turned toward the zero-pointer. He looked up at it. 15 meters of metal and malice. He felt genuinely excited. Delaware smash, he said, and hit it at 60%. The impact was seismic. The zero-pointers had disappeared in a pressure wave that cracked the pavement in a 15-meter radius and sent a shockwave of wind ripping down 3 city blocks of the mock course. The machine's body teetered, collapsed sideways, and crashed into empty space with a thunderclap that silenced the entire exam ground for a full 3 seconds. Izuku landed. Both arms intact. Both legs intact. Not a single broken bone. He hadn't hit that hard before in his life. He hadn't been able to. He looked at his hands and they were fine, and that meant whatever had happened to him last night hadn't just changed his body, it had changed how 1 for all interfaced with his body. The power moved through him the way current moves through a conductor. Clean. Complete. Behind him, he heard Ochaco's voice, small and stunned, that's amazing. He turned around. She was floating, she must have used her quirk on herself to catch the falling debris he'd knocked loose. She was looking at him with an expression he'd never had directed at him before. Not pity, not dismissal, not the complicated guilty look people gave quirkless kids. She was looking at him like something she wanted to understand better. He opened his mouth to respond, and the hunger rolled through him, not overwhelming, manageable, but present. He could smell her blood from here. He snapped his mouth shut, nodded at her, and walked away before he could do something he didn't understand yet. All Might found him after the exam. They talked in private, and the symbol of peace was visibly unsettled by what he was seeing, or rather, what he was no longer seeing. The boy he'd trained was still there, clearly. Same eyes, same analytical intensity, same fundamental kindness underneath everything. But there was a new layer on top of it, something predatory and certain that hadn't been there before. Young Midoriya, All Might said carefully, how do you feel? Good, Izuku said. Better than I've ever felt. One for all is stable in you. Izuku demonstrated by raising his right arm and running 30% through it in a controlled wave. The air around his fist shimmered. No damage. All Might's eyes went wide. It's integrated, Izuku said. It doesn't fight me anymore. Something changed last night. Something in my body changed. He paused. My heart stopped. For about 90 seconds. Young Midoriya, I was fine. I am fine. Something in my blood woke up. He met All Might's eyes directly. I think I need to figure out what I am. All Might didn't have an answer. It was the first time Izuku could remember that clearly. UA on the first day of class was simultaneously exactly what he'd imagined and nothing like he'd prepared for. The changes in him were visible enough that people noticed without knowing exactly what they were noticing. He was taller than expected from his entrance exam footage. He moved differently, not aggressively, just with a quiet certainty, like someone who knew where they were going and was confident they'd get there. When he sat down in Class 1A, the students around him kept glancing over and then looking away, not sure why they were drawn to look in the first place. Katsuki Bakugo was the exception. Bakugo stared at him with naked confusion, and confusion on Bakugo's face looked like an insult. Deku, he said, and the old diminutive didn't land the way it used to. The hell happened to you? Good to see you too, Kaken. Don't, Bakugo started, and then Aizawa walked in and that was that. Izuku noticed Momo Yaoyorozu in the first 10 minutes of class. Hard not to, she had a presence that matched her physical height, composed and precise, watching the class assessment with the sharp eyes of someone who'd already done the reading 3 times. She was the class vice representative. She answered questions with quiet authority. She was clearly brilliant. She was also, Izuku discovered with a lurch of unexpected hunger, one of the most remarkable smelling humans he'd ever encountered. He didn't know how else to think about it. Her blood had a specific quality, rich, complex, carrying some interaction with her quirk, the lipid-based composition, that made it uniquely potent to his new senses. He spent the rest of class staring at the board and controlling his breathing. Momo noticed him noticing her. Of course she did, she was Momo Yaoyorozu. But instead of the cool dismissal she gave most male attention, she looked at him with something closer to genuine curiosity. Like he was a problem she wanted to solve. After Aizawa's physical assessment, during which Izuku's performance caused the underground hero to go very still and very quiet in a way that meant a lot was happening behind his eyes, Momo caught Izuku in the hallway. Midoriya, she said. Yaoyorozu, he replied. Your entrance exam results were unusual. Not an accusation. A statement of fact, delivered with academic precision. Yeah. And your physical assessment today was also unusual. Your base physical stats, before you used your quirk, exceeded several of our classmates who've had years of specialized training. Aha. And your eyes, she said, are doing something that I don't think is standard. He looked at her. She looked back, completely composed, utterly unafraid. Her heartbeat was steady. That steadiness was, by itself, remarkable. Most people, when they got close to him now, had some kind of physiological response. Elevated heart rate, dilated pupils, the fight-or-flight response his new nature apparently triggered in people at a subconscious level. Momo's heart was beating at a perfectly calm 62 beats per minute. Can I show you something after school? He asked. A pause. Yes, she said. He found the training ground at the back of the school's secondary campus by smell. Nobody had been here in weeks, isolated enough for what he needed. He'd been managing the hunger all day and it was getting harder, the way an itch gets worse when you try to ignore it. Momo found him leaning against the far fence, both hands braced, head down. Midoriya. Her footsteps stopped a few meters back. He could hear her heartbeat pick up, just slightly, not fear, more like someone calibrating for an unexpected situation. Are you alright? Not really, he said, because one thing about his new state was that small social lies felt impossible. The progenitor's blood didn't seem to have much patience for dishonesty. I'm hungry. Not for food. A pause. Tell me what's happening. So he told her. Everything, the training session, the 90 seconds, waking up different. The senses. The speed. The way one for all integrated cleanly now. The hunger that was a constant low hum in the background of everything. He told her about his eyes and his canines and the fact that when he'd bitten his own arm experimentally last night, the wound had healed in 4 seconds. He told her all of it because her heartbeat stayed steady through the whole thing, and that steadiness felt like an invitation to be honest. When he finished, there was a silence that stretched long enough that he finally looked up. Momo was thinking. He could see it, not blank thought, active thought, the kind where she was building and testing models simultaneously. A bloodline with characteristics consistent with historical accounts of vampire mythology, she said finally. Yeah. Yeah, yes. Enhanced physical abilities, accelerated healing, sensory expansion, dietary requirements involving blood. She said it the way she would describe a chemical formula. And the hunger is currently affecting your functioning. It's manageable. Mostly. But not entirely. No. Another silence. Then Momo took 3 deliberate steps toward him. I want to understand what you are, she said. And I think the most direct way to do that is directly. Another step. I'm offering, Midoriya. If you need blood and I'm willing, then, you don't have to, I know, she said. And her heartbeat, which had been steady, finally moved, but not from fear. It was something else, something warmer. I'm choosing to. She pushed up the sleeve of her uniform, presenting the inside of her wrist. He crossed the distance between them in 1 step and stopped with her wrist in his hands, and looked up at her to check. Her eyes were clear and direct and yes. He bit her. The effect was instantaneous and mutual. Momo's free hand shot out and grabbed his shoulder, not to push him away, but to anchor herself as every quirk-related cell in her body lit up simultaneously. She could feel her creation activating at a level she'd never touched, not drawing on her lipid reserves but something deeper, something that was rewriting the efficiency of the connection between her knowledge and her production capacity. Like every limitation she'd worked within for years was a door that had suddenly opened. Izuku, for his part, felt the hunger ease in the same breath that something else exploded through him, her. Not her blood exactly, but her. Her fierce intelligence and the exhausting loneliness of performing perfection for years and the private hunger to be seen as a person rather than a Yaoyorozu asset and, underneath all of it, the warm specific warmth of someone who found him genuinely interesting and had since the moment she'd first looked at him in class. The thrall resonance formed. He felt it click into place like a key in a lock, a permanent, bidirectional emotional connection. Not control. Not possession. Just total honesty between them, a line that couldn't be hidden behind or performed around. He felt her feel it form. And then he felt her cry. He pulled back immediately, alarmed, scanning her face, but her expression wasn't distress. Her eyes were bright and her face was wet and she was looking at him with something that made his chest ache. I can feel what you think of me, she said. Her voice was steady even through the tears. That was so Momo, he thought. That was so completely her. You think I'm extraordinary. You are, he said. Most people think the Yaoyorozu name is extraordinary. They see the family, the money, the quirk. I see you figuring out a problem you've never encountered before and not being afraid of it, he said. That's not a name or a quirk. That's you. She pressed her lips together. Nodded, once, decisive. She'd filed something away in some internal system and made a decision. This connection, she said. I can feel you too. Yeah. Your hunger is less. Yeah. And she flexed her free hand and a full titanium longsword materialized in her palm in under a second. She stared at it. I've never done that so quickly. My production speed is. She dissolved the sword and created it again. Same speed. Significantly enhanced. Her eyes moved to him, and in them was the particular hunger of a scientist encountering data she wasn't prepared for. This is remarkable. Momo, he said. Yes. Are you okay? She considered the question with appropriate seriousness. I feel like the person I am when no one's watching, she said. That's, yes. Yes, I'm okay. A beat. More than okay. They stood in the fading afternoon light, and the thrall resonance hummed between them like a shared heartbeat. 3 kilometers away in a rented room full of blood-red wallpaper and the lingering scent of too many acquired faces, Himiko Toga sat cross-legged on a too-small bed and vibrated. Something had changed in the air. She'd felt the first pulse of it yesterday, a shift in whatever frequency her blood hunger operated on, like a radio station suddenly coming in clear after years of static. And then today it had gotten stronger, more specific, directional. She could feel it the way she felt the pull towards someone whose blood she wanted, except this was different. This was deeper. This was something that spoke directly to whatever weird wrong thing lived at the center of her, the blood-hungry monster that she'd decided a long time ago to just embrace because it wasn't going anywhere. Something had woken up somewhere in this city. Something that understood what she was. She hugged her knees to her chest and thought about it. Shigaraki had called her 3 times today and she'd ignored all 3 because she didn't care about plans or league meetings or the Liberation War. She cared about this feeling, this pull, this promise of something that finally recognized her. She picked up her phone and opened a map of the city. She'd find it. She was good at finding things. She was great at it. In a government building that didn't appear on any public map, a woman in a white suit sat behind a desk that was exactly as austere as everything else in her office and looked at a report with the particular stillness of someone who had been waiting for bad news and wasn't surprised to receive it. Madame Vesper. 62 years old and looking 45 through methods that the report in her hands could have explained, if anyone had been authorized to read it. President of the Hero Public Safety Commission, appointed 8 years ago, the final layer between Hero Society and everything Hero Society was built on top of and tried very hard to forget. The report said, anomalous bloodline activation detected. Epicenter, Mizurufu. Candidate match, Midoriya, Izuku. Age 16. UA Heroics Program applicant. She set the report down. Looked at the wall, where behind a standard piece of abstract art was a sealed compartment containing a file she'd hoped would remain unopened for at least another decade. Protocol Nightfall, she said. Her secretary's voice came through the intercom, I'll initiate activation immediately, madam. Tell Hikari she'll have full operational authority within 48 hours. Yes, madam. Vesper looked at the report again. Midoriya, Izuku. 16 years old. She thought about what that meant, what it always meant when this bloodline surfaced. The disruption, the political fallout, the women who got drawn in before anyone could stop it, the power that built and built until it was too large to manage quietly. She thought about the facility outside the city. The ancient thing sealed in its depths, what it had cost to put it there, what it had cost every year since to keep it there. Not again, she said quietly. She opened the file. The next 2 weeks at UA were a specific kind of controlled chaos that Izuku was getting surprisingly good at navigating. The thrall resonance with Momo meant that from the moment he sat in class 1A every morning, He had a constant gentle awareness of her location, the broad strokes of her emotional state, her focus and frustration and occasional flashes of satisfaction when she solved something. It wasn't intrusive. It was warm, like background music you stopped noticing until you realized you'd been listening all along. She came to him 3 more times in the first 2 weeks for blood. Each time was both more natural and more intense, the bond deepening, her quirk capacity expanding, and the emotional honesty between them developing a specificity that was almost frightening in its intimacy. He knew when she was anxious before she showed it. She knew when his hunger was building before he said anything. They hadn't talked about what they were to each other. But the bond made labels redundant, they both knew exactly what it was, stripped of all the social language they would have used to pad around it. In class, Izuku's performance was consistently monstrous. Aizawa had stopped looking surprised and started looking calculating, which Izuku thought was probably more dangerous. During the battle trial, Izuku was paired against Todoroki, a fight that should have been one-sided in Todoroki's favor given the sheer destructive capacity of half-hot half-cold, and instead became something that the watching class went very quiet observing. Todoroki opened with ice. Izuku went under it at a speed that most of the class couldn't track visually, closed the distance, and stopped with one fist pressed gently against Todoroki's solar plexus. "I'm faster than your ice," Izuku said. "I can end it from here." He stepped back. "But I'm not going to. Let's actually fight." Todoroki studied him for a long moment. Then his left side ignited and the fight actually started, and it was 20 minutes of genuine back and forth that left the entire mock building in ruins and both of them breathing hard, grinning, and undefeated in each other's eyes because neither of them had managed a clean finish. "What are you?" Todoroki asked afterward, genuinely. "Working on figuring that out," Izuku said. Bakugo was furious about all of it in a way he could barely articulate even to himself. He'd spent years with a specific understanding of Deku, weak, quirkless, hopeless, and that understanding had already been complicated by the entrance exam footage. Now every time he turned around, Deku was doing something that didn't fit the old model, and Bakugo Katsuki's relationship with information that didn't fit his models was to get loud about it. He cornered Izuku after training one day. "Explain," he said. "Explain what?" "Don't play stupid." "You're not stupid, you've never been stupid, don't do the fake modest thing right now." Bakugo's hands crackled. "You went from literally quirkless to that," he gestured vaguely at all of Izuku, "overnight. What happened?" Izuku looked at him for a long moment. Bakugo was the last person on Earth he'd expected to ask for an actual explanation rather than just an excuse to be angry. The earnestness of it, buried under the aggression, was almost touching. "Something in my blood woke up," Izuku said. "Something old. Old. Older than quirks." Bakugo stared at him. Yeah. That's completely insane." "I know." Another pause. Bakugo's jaw worked like he was chewing through something that tasted bad. "You're still annoyingly weak to me," he said finally. "Sure, Kaken. Stop calling me that." He left. But he looked back once, which he absolutely would have denied if asked. The hunger was manageable with Momo's blood, but it didn't disappear entirely. It was a constant presence, and his vampiric nature was making itself known in other ways, specifically in his awareness of and reaction to the women around him. It wasn't indiscriminate. That was the important thing he figured out in those first weeks. The vampiric pull, the hunger that oriented itself toward specific people, wasn't random physical attraction. It was something deeper, a biological recognition of compatibility, of women whose blood and energy and essential nature resonated with his awakened state. He felt it around Ochaco and worked very hard not to act on it because she was his friend and this was already complicated enough. He felt a different version of it around Midnight, which was profoundly uncomfortable given that she was his teacher and seemed unaware of it, which made it somehow worse. What he didn't feel was anything toward Mina Ashido when she bumped into him in the hallway, or toward the support course girl who kept trying to examine his uniform modifications, or toward a dozen other classmates. Whatever his blood was doing, it was selective. He was making notes in his room at 11 p.m., trying to categorize and understand what he was experiencing, when the Momo thread in his awareness flared with something sharp: surprise, concern, focus. He was on his feet and out his window before he consciously decided to move. He found her in the UA library, surrounded by books she'd pulled from the history section, and she looked up at him with bright eyes when he came in. "I've been researching," she said. "I noticed. There are records, suppressed, but not fully erased, because bureaucracies never fully erase things, of non-quirk supernatural bloodlines that predated the quirk phenomenon. Most academic historical accounts dismiss them as mythology." She pushed a book toward him, open to an illustration of a figure that made his stomach drop. The proportions were wrong, too idealized, but the features, the eyes especially, looked enough like him to be uncomfortable. But cross-referenced with anthropological records from before quirk emergence, and medical archives from the early hero licensing period. She looked up at him. "Izuku." There were purges. He sat down across from her. "Tell me." The first generation of officially licensed heroes, the ones who established the quirk registration system and the hero licensing framework, weren't just organizing quirk users. They were establishing a monopoly on power. Any ability that fell outside the quirk classification system was systematically documented, and then she tapped a page that contained a commission seal on a document titled Resolution 0, Non-Registered Entities. Systematically eliminated. Izuku looked at the document. At the seal. The same seal he'd seen on commission letterheads his entire life. "They tried to kill them all," he said. "They thought they succeeded." She met his eyes. "They didn't." He sat with that for a while. The library was quiet. The thrall resonance was warm and steady between them, and in it, he could feel her concern, not for herself, but for him. For what this information meant for him. "How many people know about this?" he asked. "Officially? No one. The records are classified above top secret." She paused. "But classified things have researchers, and researchers talk, and I have access to my family's academic network which has." She smiled slightly, and it was a specific smile, private, a little guilty. "Let's say, broader access than officially sanctioned channels." "Momo." "Yes. You hacked the commission archives." "I accessed loosely secured historical research through established academic network access protocols that technically don't prohibit. You absolutely hacked them." A pause. Her smile got slightly less guilty and slightly more like the real one. "Yes. I did. And I'll do it again if necessary." Despite everything, he laughed. She laughed too, soft and startled, like she'd forgotten she knew how. "We need to be careful," he said, when the laughter settled. "Whatever they tried to do to people like me before, they'll try to do again if they find out what I am." "I know," she said. "That's why I started 3 days ago." She opened her notebook. "I've already begun building a legal protection framework around you. I have contacts in my family's legal network. It won't be impenetrable, but it will buy time." He stared at her. "You started before I knew there was a problem." "I started when I realized the commission would consider you a problem." She held his gaze. "I decided before the library, Izuku. I decided in the training ground when you told me what you were, and I saw that you were afraid, not of what you were, but of what it might mean for everyone around you." She closed her notebook. "I'm not going anywhere." The bond thrummed between them. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Thank you," he said. She turned her hand over and squeezed his. "Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do." He was coming back from a late-night run, he needed less sleep now, which was convenient, and the city at 2 a.m. was a different animal that his new senses found genuinely beautiful, when he stopped on a rooftop and realized he wasn't alone. The rooftop was across the street from the Heights Alliance dormitory building. He was standing in shadow, and in his peripheral vision, something else was standing in a different shadow 30 meters to his left. Watching the dormitory. He turned slowly. Met yellow eyes that went wide when they realized he'd spotted them. Himiko Toga froze, half hidden behind a rooftop water tank, dressed in her gray uniform and smelling like she'd been tracking him for about 2 hours. She looked caught, and for a fraction of a second she looked like a person who didn't know what to do with that. Then the manic grin slid back into place. "Oh," she said, like she was commenting on the weather. "You can see in the dark." "You've been following me," he said. "For like a week." She didn't seem embarrassed by this. "You're hard to track. You're fast and you don't leave normal person smells. But blood," she tapped her nose, "blood I can always find." He studied her. She studied him back with the intensity of someone who'd been waiting for something for a very long time. "You're from the League of Villains," he said. "Yep. You attacked UA during the USJ incident." "Guilty." He should have been reaching for his phone to call it in. He knew that. He was very aware that he should be doing that. Instead he was standing here because her blood, even from 30 meters, even through the city smell, was the most distinctive thing he'd encountered since Momo. Different in quality, jagged and bright where Momo's was deep and complex, but undeniably, powerfully resonant with something in him. And there was something else. Something he hadn't recognized before because he didn't have the context, but now that he understood a little more about what he was, he could hear it in her blood. A frequency. Faint, diluted by generations, but real. "You have it too," he said. The manic mask dropped again. Just for a second. She looked stunned. "Vampire blood," he said. "Diluted, generations down, but it's there. That's why I'm like this," she breathed. She took a step toward him. "That's why the blood thing isn't just a quirk, I feel it in my chest, I feel it all the time, everyone says I'm sick, I'm wrong, I'm a monster, but it's not sick, it's real," he said. "It's what you are." She stopped 2 meters from him. Up close, her eyes were extraordinary, golden, bright, swimming with an emotion she didn't have clean words for. Her heartbeat was hammering, not from fear, from the edge of something. "You're the first person," she said, "who's ever said that to me." He looked at her for a long time. Toga Himiko, 15 years old, League of Villains, wanted by the Commission, violent history, mental health crisis, blood obsession that everyone in her life had labeled as pure pathology. Toga Himiko, who had vampire ancestry she didn't know she had, responding to the first true awakened vampire in generations the way iron responds to a magnet. He thought about the right thing to do. The hero thing. And then he thought about the progenitor's memories, bleeding through his dreams, a king who didn't turn away from those who came to him. Who understood that his nature called to certain people, and that turning them away was its own kind of violence. "You're not going to attack anyone tonight," he said. "It wasn't a question. I just wanted to find you." She crossed her arms over her chest. "I've been feeling you for a week and it was driving me crazy. If I bring you inside the dormitory, Aizawa will expel me and possibly you will be arrested." "Probably yeah. But if we stay on this rooftop, I'm just a girl sitting on a rooftop," she agreed. "Totally legal." He sat down on the rooftop edge and she sat next to him without being asked, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and they looked out at the city together. "What's your name?" she asked. "I know it's Midoriya Izuku from League Intelligence Files but I want you to say it." "Izuku," he said. "What do I call you?" "Toga." She thought about it. "Himiko, if you want." "Nobody calls me Himiko anymore." She looked at him sidelong. "Can I smell you?" "That's a strange question." "I have strange needs." He tilted his head slightly. "An offering." She leaned in and inhaled against the side of his neck, and the sound she made was quiet and complicated, hunger and wonder and something raw that she quickly swallowed. "You smell like blood and old things and something I don't have a word for," she said. "Power," he said. "Yeah." She pulled back. "Yeah, exactly that." A pause. "I'm not going to pretend I came here for innocent reasons. I know. And I'm not going to pretend that what I want from you is totally normal. I know that too." She looked at her hands. "I've hurt a lot of people. Because of what I am. Because of the blood thing." Her voice lost its performative brightness. "Just a girl, talking honestly. Everyone I've ever wanted to be close to, I hurt them or scared them or they tried to have me committed." A short pause. "My parents tried to have me committed. I know what it's like to be told you're wrong," he said. "To be told what you are isn't acceptable." She looked at him quickly. "I was quirkless," he said simply. "For 16 years. Everyone told me I was incomplete. Wrong. Impossible. But you have a quirk, now. What I have now isn't a quirk." He held up his hand, let just a little of his vampiric power show, his veins faintly luminous for a second, his eyes brightening. "This is something older and they would have tried to kill me for it if they'd known sooner." Toga stared at his hand. Then she reached out and took it, turning it over, tracing the faintly glowing veins with a fingertip. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "So is what you are," he said. "It's not sick. It's diluted vampire ancestry expressing itself without the proper context to make sense of it." She was quiet for a long time. The city hummed below them. Her heartbeat was doing something complicated, settling, gradually, from its constant elevated anxiety towards something that was almost calm. "I want to bond with you," she said, out of nowhere, with total certainty. "You just met me. I've been feeling you for a week and I know what you are and I know what I am and I know what this is." She looked at him with those golden eyes. "Don't pretend the blood doesn't tell you things." He looked back at her. The blood did tell him things. It told him that her ancestry, diluted as it was calling to his as naturally as breathing. It told him that the chaos and the knives and the manic performance were the shell that had grown over someone who'd never been given a reason to show her core. It told him that her core was fierce and loyal and desperately, painfully capable of genuine love. "Not tonight," he said. She blinked. "Not because I don't feel what you're feeling," he said. "But because if we do this right, you have to actually know me. And I have to know you. The bond isn't temporary. You'll feel me and I'll feel you, for as long as either of us exists." He met her eyes. "That deserves more than a rooftop at 2 in the morning." Toga stared at him. Then something happened in her face that he suspected happened very rarely. Her expressions usually cycled through with the speed and randomness of a slot machine, but this one stayed. Settled. Real. "Okay," she said. "Just that. Will you come back tomorrow night?" "Yeah." She stood, and some of the performance came back, the bounce in her step, the grin, but it was lighter now, less frantic. "I'll bring snacks." "Don't bring snacks that came from hurting someone." She gasped theatrically. "Sir, I am offended." Toga. "Fine. Convenience store snacks." She was gone before he could respond, dropping off the side of the rooftop with an ease that spoke to her physical training, and he tracked her heartbeat moving away through the city streets, bright and jagged and strangely warm. He sat on the rooftop edge and looked at the city. Somewhere in the dark, a woman in a white suit was reading a classified file. Somewhere in a sealed facility outside the city, something ancient and patient was beginning to stir for the first time in generations. And in a dormitory room below him, he could feel Momo's sleeping heartbeat through their bond, steady, warm, content. He was Izuku Midoriya. He had died for 90 seconds and come back as something his world didn't have words for. He had one woman who had chosen him with her eyes open and a connection to a second that was going to complicate everything, and a hunger in his blood that he was slowly, carefully learning to understand. He was not afraid. He looked out at the city, and the city looked back, and for the first time in 16 years, he felt exactly like what he was. Something that had been waiting, in his blood and bones, for a very long time. Something that had just woken up. Chapter 2, Blood Court. Toga brought convenience store onigiri and absolutely did not explain why 3 of them had suspiciously similar bite marks on the packaging. Izuku didn't ask. He ate 2 of the unmarked ones and they sat on the same rooftop as the night before, and this time the conversation went longer and went deeper, and by the end of it he understood Toga Himiko better than most people who'd known her for years. That was the thing about his new nature, it stripped the usual social scaffolding away. People either fled from him or told him the truth, and Toga had never been the fleeing type. She came back the 3rd night. And the 4th. On the 5th night she showed up with a bruise along her jaw that she didn't explain and he didn't push, but he could smell old blood in it and his jaw went tight in a way he had to consciously manage. League business, she said lightly. Toga. Shigaraki wanted me to do something. I said I was busy. He expressed his disagreement physically. She shrugged with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to make it look like shrugging was natural. Not the first time. Izuku looked at the bruise. His hand moved before his brain fully signed off on it, fingers coming up to hover just beside the discolored skin. Does it hurt? Everything hurts all the time, I'm used to it. She said it like a fact and not a complaint, which made it worse. You shouldn't be with them. I shouldn't be a lot of places. She met his eyes. I'm here, aren't I? The bond happened the way he'd known it eventually would, not as a dramatic event but as the inevitable conclusion of 5 nights of radical honesty. She was bleeding from a cut on her hand that she'd gotten from a wire fence on the way up, small and already clotting, and she held it up to him without ceremony. I know what I'm doing, she said. I've thought about it every day this week. I know what the bond means, I know it's permanent, I know I'll feel you and you'll feel me. A beat. I want that. I've never wanted anything more clearly in my life. He took her hand. He looked at the cut. He looked at her. Once this happens, he said, you're not going back to the League. I know. It's not going to be simple or safe for you. Izuku. She said his name for the first time, and it sounded different in her mouth, not soft, but certain. I've been living complicated and unsafe my whole life. At least this way I'll have someone who actually, she stopped. Swallowed. Someone who actually. He understood what she meant. He bit her hand. The difference from Momo's bond was immediate and total. Where Momo's had been like a deep current moving in one direction, steady, powerful, controlled, Toga's was lightning. The connection formed in a crack of sensation that went through both of them hard enough to make her gasp and him see white for a second. He felt her, the chaos, yes, the obsession, yes, but beneath them, the loneliness that had no floor, the love that had always been too large and too strange for the container she tried to put it in. The longing to be known and not run from. And she felt him. He felt her feel him, his hunger and his warmth and his growing protectiveness and the specific sharp relief of finding another person who understood blood the way he did. Her quirk detonated. She transformed involuntarily, not into any person specifically but flickering through a cascade of faces, features cycling rapidly before snapping back to her own. And then, settling, she looked at her hands and slowly, deliberately transformed into Izuku. Down to the crimson-rimmed eyes. Down to the specific physical weight of him. Oh, she said, in his voice. Then she laughed, his laugh but with her inflection, and changed back. I can do you. I've never been able to do someone who wasn't a quirk user before. She looked at her hands. I can feel your quirk in there. One for all. And the vampire stuff. It's like wearing the sun. Don't transform into me and do anything embarrassing. Absolutely no promises. She was grinning, fully, genuinely, the manic performance gone and replaced with something that was just her, bright and sharp and warm. She grabbed his arm with both hands and pressed her face against his shoulder. "I'm keeping you," she announced. "You're mine now. You understand how bonds work, right? It goes both ways." "Good." She squeezed tighter. "Good, I want that." Through the fresh bond he could feel her, fierce and present and so genuinely happy that it made his chest ache. He put his arm around her and felt her settle against him like something that had been searching for a specific shape finally finding it. "You're going to have to meet Momo," he said. "The pretty one from your class." He paused. "You know about Momo?" "I've been watching you for a week, Izuku, I know about everyone." She looked up at him. "She's already bonded to you. I can smell it on you. The bond changes how someone's blood smells, hers is all over your emotional frequency or whatever." A beat. "Is she going to hate me?" "Probably initially." "Fantastic." She didn't sound concerned. "I've been hated before." "It's fine." Then, quieter, "Do you think she'll, eventually, do you think, I think," he said carefully, "that Momo is one of the most perceptive people I've ever met, and once she feels what you feel through the bond network, she's going to have a hard time maintaining a position that isn't based in reality." Toga was quiet for a moment. "You think she'll actually see me?" "I think she'll have to," he said. "The bond makes lying basically impossible." Another silence. Then, "That's terrifying." "Yeah. But kind of." She pressed her face against his shoulder again. "Kind of nice." Momo's reaction was, as predicted, not immediately warm. She arrived at the situation the way she arrived at most things, already 3 steps ahead analytically. Izuku had told her about Toga the morning after the bond formed, sitting across from her at breakfast before class, and she'd listened with her hands flat on the table and her face doing the particular composed thing it did when she was processing something that required careful handling. "Himiko Toga," she said. "League of Villains. Wanted in connection with multiple assaults and at least 2 counts of suspected homicide." "Yes." "Currently bonded to you." "Yes." "And you want me to, I don't want you to do anything except be open to feeling what she actually feels." He held her gaze. "Not what her file says. What she actually is." Momo's jaw was tight. "Izuku, the bond is not a substitute for character assessment. The bond creating emotional honesty between you and another person doesn't automatically mean, meet her," he said. "That's all I'm asking." She met her. It happened in the training ground at 10 p.m., and it went exactly as well as Izuku had expected, which was to say it started terribly. Toga arrived doing a backflip off the fence because she couldn't do anything normally, and she landed in front of Momo and grinned with all her teeth and said, "Hi. You're really pretty. I thought about stealing your face but your blood smells too important so I didn't." Momo turned to Izuku. "Absolutely not. Give it 5 minutes," he said. "I'm not giving, feel the bond," he said. She went still. He could see her do it, consciously reaching through the thrall resonance toward the new thread that ran from him to Toga. It took a few seconds for her face to change, and when it changed, it was subtle, a softening around the eyes. A line between her brows smoothing out. Toga, for her part, had gone oddly still. She was looking at Momo with the focused intensity she usually reserved for people whose blood she was cataloging. "You're feeling me," she said. "Not a question." "I'm feeling," Momo stopped. Started again. "You're lonely." Toga's grin flickered. "You've been lonely your whole life," Momo said, and her voice had gone from cool to something complicated. "And you've covered it with," she gestured at the energy, the knives, the general Toga-ness of Toga. "All of this. The pretty ones always get it first," Toga said, and her voice was smaller than usual. Momo looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Izuku. Then back at Toga. I'm not going to pretend this isn't difficult, she said. Your history is real. What you've done to people is real. I'm not dismissing that. Okay, Toga said. But what you feel is also real. Momo held her gaze. And I know what it is to want to be seen for what you actually are. Something shifted in Toga's face. You do. I've spent my entire life being my family's name. Being a quirk with a person attached. Momo's voice was steady but honest in the way it only got through the bond's influence, stripped of performance. The feeling of no one looking past the surface. Yes. I know that. Toga stared at her. Then, with the abruptness that characterized most of her genuine emotional responses, she said, I don't want to steal your face anymore. I want to actually know your face. Momo blinked. It was possibly the most sincere and strangest compliment she'd ever received. That's, a pause. Thank you. I think. It wasn't friendship. Not that night. But it was the beginning of something, and Izuku felt it through both bonds simultaneously, Momo's cautious opening, Toga's desperate hope, and he felt like maybe the thing he was building was going to be more complex and more real than anything he could have planned. He walked into Midnight's class on a Thursday morning and knew immediately that something was different. She'd always been professional beneath the costume and the persona. Good at her job, genuinely knowledgeable, with the specific intensity of someone who'd built a public character so thoroughly that most people had forgotten there was a private one. He'd liked her class from the first week. She was sharp and her lectures had an energy to them that kept you engaged even when the content was dry. But Thursday morning she was looking at him differently, and his vampiric senses picked up the difference before his conscious mind did. Her heartbeat was slightly elevated. Her eyes tracked him from the moment he walked in, and they had the quality of someone who had done a lot of research and arrived at a conclusion they weren't sure they were happy about. He sat down. Her gaze moved on. The class proceeded normally. Afterward, when everyone was filing out, her voice caught him. Midoriya. A moment. The classroom emptied. She waited until the last student was through the door, then crossed to it and closed it, and turned to face him with her arms crossed and her expression doing something that wasn't her teaching face or her midnight face but a third face he hadn't seen before. Careful. Serious. Genuinely searching. How long have you known? She asked. He could play dumb. The option presented itself and he dismissed it immediately because she clearly knew something specific and playing dumb would be an insult to her intelligence and his own. About what I am. Since the night before the entrance exam. She nodded slowly. And how long has Yaoyorozu been bonded to you? The air in the room changed. He felt it in her heartbeat, a spike, controlled immediately. She wasn't afraid. She was something else. He studied her. You know what the bond is, he said. I know what the bond is, she confirmed. I've been researching suppressed historical texts for years. Academic hobby, or so I told myself. She unfolded her arms. My grandmother used to talk about old things. Things her grandmother had told her. Beings who were part of communities in ways that modern relationships don't really have language for. I thought they were stories. She looked at him directly. You're not a story. No. She crossed to her desk and opened a drawer and put a folder on the desk between them, thick, dense with printed pages and handwritten notes in the margins. Everything I could find, she said. Which isn't much but it's more than most. The Commission's suppression of this history is thorough, but they didn't get everything. She tapped the folder. I found records of the purge. I found records of what they sealed. Her eyes came up to his. I found records of the facility. He went still. What facility? Outside the city. What they're keeping there. She held his gaze. Your ancestor, Izuku. They've had him for over 100 years. They've been, she stopped. Her jaw worked. For the first time he saw something crack in the midnight persona, genuine anger underneath it, hot and controlled. What they've been doing to the body is, she stopped again. It's monstrous. Whatever else anyone wants to say about the Commission's reasoning, what they've been doing in that facility is monstrous. He sat down. Not because his legs gave out, they didn't. He sat down because the information needed to be absorbed sitting down, with his hands flat on a desk and his breathing controlled. His ancestor. In a facility. Being used. The progenitor's dreams, the fragments of memory bleeding through his sleep, suddenly reorganized around a new axis. The sense of wrongness in those visions. The interrupted quality. The progenitor wasn't dreaming peacefully in some sealed sleep. The progenitor was imprisoned and aware and slowly starving. How long have you known about the facility? He said. 3 weeks. She sat across from him. I found the records 2 days before the entrance exam results were posted. Before I knew you were, before I knew this. She gestured between them. When I put it together, your exam performance, the physical changes, Yaoyorozu's quirk capacity suddenly expanding, I started watching you. A pause. I've been watching you for 2 weeks. And you waited. I needed to be sure. She looked at her hands, then back at him. And I needed to figure out what I wanted to do with being sure. What did you decide? She met his eyes. Namiri Kayama, 31 years old, UA's 18+ hero course teacher, the woman who'd built Midnight into one of the most recognized hero personas in the country. Behind all of it, a private woman who'd spent a decade being the person everyone wanted in their fantasies and no one wanted in their actual lives. He could see it because the bond-adjacent instinct read people whether he wanted it to or not. I've spent a long time performing, she said. Being exactly what the room expects. Being Midnight. She said the name flatly. It works. Professionally, it works brilliantly. Personally, she stopped. Personally, I haven't let anyone close in years because anyone who gets close wants Midnight and not, she touched her own face. Not this. I see this, he said. She looked at him sharply. I don't have a choice, he said. My nature reads people. I see what you actually are. And what you actually are is, he thought about how to say it. You're a woman who's spent so long being magnetic on command that you've forgotten what it feels like when the magnetism is real. Her breath caught. Just slightly. I'm not telling you it's real to manipulate you into anything, he said. I'm telling you because the bond makes honesty compulsive and what I feel around you is, he paused. Let himself actually name it instead of managing it. Specific. It's been specific since the first day of class and I've been controlling it because you're my teacher and the situation is already complicated. She was quiet for a long moment. Her heartbeat was doing something he hadn't heard it do before, a particular rhythm, faster and softer simultaneously. Her quirk, he realized distantly, was operating, the pheromone production was active at a low level, involuntary, responding to proximity and the conversation. And those pheromones, which should have affected him the way they affected any normal person, instead mingled with the vampiric aura he put out and created something in the air between them that made both of them go slightly still. That's, she said. That's my quirk. It's not, I'm not doing it intentionally. I know. He could smell it, not unpleasant, the opposite of unpleasant. My nature is interfering with the output. The pheromones are mixing with what you put out, she finished. She looked almost amused despite the charged air. We're a feedback loop. Seems like. She stood up. Walked around the desk, slowly, and stopped a foot in front of him. Up close, she was Midnight, yes, but she was also the woman underneath Midnight, and right now the distance between those two things was very small. I've read everything I could find about the bond, she said. I know what it means. I know it's permanent. I know it changes things. She looked at him steadily. And I know it requires me to want it genuinely and not from the feedback loop or the moment or whatever this is right now. Yes, he said. So let me be clear. She held his gaze. I want it. Not because of the feedback loop. I've wanted something real for years and I've been settling for the performance of it because the performance is safer. She reached up and touched his jaw, deliberate, chosen, not impulsive. You're not safe. At all. The commission is going to come for you and it's going to be dangerous and my career may not survive my being associated with you. She dropped her hand. I've thought about all of it. I'm choosing this. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he took her hand from where it had dropped and turned it over and bit her wrist. The effect on Midnight was entirely its own phenomenon. Her somnambulist quirk operated on chemical pathways, pheromone production, neurological sedation triggers. When Izuku's vampiric nature entered her bloodstream, those pathways lit up like a circuit board and then expanded beyond their usual range. The pheromone output tripled. The sedative component mutated. It didn't just suppress consciousness now, it influenced emotional states at a deep level, creating feelings of comfort, warmth, trust. She could, he realized as the bond formed, functionally manage the emotional atmosphere of entire buildings. She made a sound that was nothing like anything she'd ever produced for a camera or a room full of students. It was private and genuine and it cracked something in him open. Through the fresh bond, he felt her, and what he felt was someone meeting herself for the first time in years. The Midnight persona was a wall, and the bond walked straight through it and found the woman who'd built the wall in the first place, brilliant, intensely passionate, funny in the dry specific way that the persona was too big to show, and lonely with the particular loneliness of someone who'd been choosing safety over connection for so long they'd almost forgotten the difference. She felt him feel that, and her eyes filled. I told you, he said quietly. I know, she said. I know you did. She pressed her free hand over her eyes for a moment, not theatrical, just real. Then she straightened, dropped the hand, and looked at him with something he'd never seen on Midnight's face. Nakedness. Real nakedness, not the kind she performed. Nobody gets to know about this until we're ready, she said. Not because I'm ashamed. Because I need to build the right narrative to protect you, and a UA teacher with an unauthorized bond to a student is, I know, he said. I trust you. The bond hummed. She exhaled. Yayorozu is going to have thoughts. She's already having them. He could feel Momo through her bond, the awareness that something had just shifted in the network, her analytical mind already processing. She'll want to strategize. Good. Something shifted in Midnight's expression, the two faces integrating slightly, Midnight's capability meeting the private woman's genuine feeling. So will I. And Izuku, she met his eyes. We're going to need to move fast. If I found those facility records, the commission knows that someone has found them. The attack came on a Wednesday. Joint training exercise, off-campus, Izuku's class and a section of second years working through a mock search and rescue scenario in an industrial district 2 kilometers from UA's standard stuff, controlled chaos, points for civilian evacuation efficiency, hero-student coordination practice. The first pseudo-vampire came out of a drainage tunnel and moved at a speed that froze everyone in place for a critical second. It looked wrong. The proportions were almost right, bipedal, humanoid, but the skin was wrong, gray-white and tight, and the eyes were entirely crimson with no iris visible, blown wide and blank. It moved in the lurching fast way of something that had gotten speed without getting the neurological coordination to manage it properly. And when it opened its mouth, the teeth weren't clean and sharp like Izuku's. They were jagged, multiple rows of them, like the body had tried to grow them correctly and failed. It hit a second-year student, a kid named Fukudashi, and knocked him 30 feet into a wall before anyone had processed that it was a threat. Then 4 more came out of the drainage system. And then 6. Everyone scatter. That was Izuku, already moving. He'd felt them coming, wrong blood, wrong frequency, something that his vampiric senses had been flagging for 30 seconds before they appeared. Get civilians out of the immediate area, cluster in defensible positions, don't let them grab you. A pseudo-vampire lunged at Shoto Todoroki, who caught it in a wall of ice from both sides and then blasted it with fire when the ice didn't hold the way it should have. It regenerated. Poorly, the reforming tissue was visibly corrupted, full of gaps, but it got up. They regenerate. Todoroki called. Overwhelm them. Izuku called back. He'd already taken 2 out with 1 for all at 40%, high-speed strikes aimed at structural weak points, the skull, the spine. They went down and stayed down for longer when hit at those locations. High impact, central nervous system, don't let them close. A pseudo-vampire crossed the distance to Ochaco faster than she could react. Izuku was there before it reached her, 40 feet covered in something under a second, a blur that arrived between her and the creature with enough force that his shoulder strike sent it through a concrete divider. Ochaco grabbed his arm to catch her balance, and their eyes met, and he saw it in hers, the recognition. Not fear. Recognition. She'd seen him move in class, seen the training results, but this was combat speed and combat presence, and she was looking at him like something had clicked into place in her understanding of him. "I've got you," he said. "I know," she said. Her heartbeat was fast but steady. "Go. I'll handle myself." He went. The fight lasted 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes Izuku moved at speeds that most of the observing students could not fully track visually. He coordinated via shouted instructions and the thermal and sensory data his vampiric awareness gave him. He knew where every pseudo-vampire was, he could feel their wrong blood like static against his awareness. He directed Todoroki to cut off escape routes. He called Kirishima into tanking duty when one needed to be held in place. He used Ciro's tape to bind one long enough to examine it properly. When the last one went down, Izuku crouched over it and looked at it carefully. This close, he could smell the stolen blood in it, his ancestors' blood, synthesized and corrupted and forced into bodies that couldn't properly contain it. It made him angry in a way that went very deep. Bakugo landed next to him with an explosion, crouching to look at the creature as well. "The hell is this?" he said. Not yelling, for once. His voice was flat with something between disgust and genuine concern. "Someone tried to make one of me," Izuku said. Bakugo looked at him sharply. "And failed." Izuku stood. "These are experiments. Someone's been experimenting with blood they shouldn't have access to." He looked around at the class, scattered, some injured, all shaken. Fukudashi was going to need medical attention. Kaminari had taken a hit that left his voltage discharge erratic. Mina had an ugly bruise developing across her shoulder. He felt each of them like a specific ache, not because he was bonded to all of them but because they were his people, his class, and something had come for them. Something that was connected to his blood. "This is my fault," he said. "No," said Momo, who had appeared at his right elbow, a medical supply kit open in her hands that she'd created for immediate triage. "Someone else's actions are their own fault. This is your problem to help solve." She met his eyes. "Different thing." "She's right," said Midnight, who'd been supervising the exercise. Her voice was her professional voice, clear and authoritative, but through the bond he felt her fury, controlled, cold, and very specific. "Someone is experimenting illegally and they used your students as test subjects. That's a law enforcement matter. A beat. We'll make sure it's treated as one." Bakugo was still looking at Izuku with the particular focused expression that meant he was reconfiguring something. "You knew they were coming," he said. "Before they showed up. 30 seconds before. And you were moving before the rest of us processed there was a threat." "Yes." Bakugo was quiet for a moment. His hands crackled, a habit he had when he was thinking something he wasn't ready to say. "Useful," he said finally. Turned away. Walked toward the injured students to check on them, because underneath everything Bakugo was going to be a hero, and checking on injured classmates was what heroes did. Izuku watched him go. Momo's hand found his arm. "This is connected to the facility," she said quietly. "Isn't it?" "Has to be," he said. "Then we're running out of time." He found Ochaco that evening sitting on the common room couch, her knees pulled up, looking at the window with the expression of someone who had a lot they were working through. She hadn't been injured in the attack, but she'd come close enough, and close enough was its own thing. She looked up when he walked in and something in her expression shifted immediately, not the shift of someone performing ease but the shift of someone who decided to stop waiting. "Sit with me," she said. He sat. Close but not presumptuous, her space, her pace. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I've had feelings for you since the entrance exam." She said it to the window, then turned and said it to him directly. "Not as a crush, I don't mean a passing thing. I mean I've thought about you almost every day since then and I kept not saying anything because you were struggling and the timing was never right and I didn't want to make things weird, and then you changed and," she stopped. "And I was scared the change would mean there wasn't room. That you'd become this big powerful thing and I'd still just be." "Stop," he said. She stopped. "You are not just anything," he said. He turned toward her on the couch, and she turned toward him, and he took her hands, careful, deliberate, and held them. "You were the first person I wanted to protect with my new strength. That first day. The 0-pointer. You were the first person I thought about keeping safe when I understood what I was becoming." He met her eyes. "That wasn't because of the blood or the bond or whatever my biology is doing. That was you, from the first day." Her eyes were bright. "But Momo is real. And Toga is real. And," he exhaled. "I know how this sounds. I know how it looks from outside. But what I feel for you doesn't compete with what I feel for them. My capacity for this, for connection, for caring, for protection, it expanded. Not divided." He squeezed her hands. "There's a version of me in this new life that doesn't have you in it and that version is lesser. Full stop." She looked at him for a long moment. Brown eyes, warm and searching and entirely themselves, not performing anything at all. "Can I?" she said, and indicated the space between them with a slight tip of her head. "Yeah," he said. She kissed him. Soft, certain, nothing tentative about it except that it was also entirely itself, Ochaco's specific warmth, her unself-consciousness, the fullness of a person who did things completely when they decided to do them. When they separated she said, "Bond me. Ochaco, I've thought about it. I know what it is. I want the honesty of it, I want you to feel what I feel and I want to feel you back and I don't want to pretend anymore that I'm going to be patient about this." She held his gaze steadily. "Please." He bit her. The bond formed with a warmth that was entirely Ochaco, generous and whole and clear. Her zero-gravity quirk flared and she lifted off the couch, floating 2 feet off the ground, her eyes going wide and then filling with laughter. Her ability expanded outward, she could feel gravity in a radius around her, a field of her own influence rather than just contact points. She was laughing. Floating. Her hands gripping his shoulders and her body hovering above the couch with pure quirk joy. "Oh," she said. "Oh, that's wonderful." Through the new bond, Momo felt it happen and sent a warm pulse of acknowledgement. Toga felt it and sent something fierce and approving. Midnight sent a quiet satisfaction. And Ochaco felt all of them for the first time, and went very still for a moment, just receiving. Then she looked at him from her floating position with an expression that was completely open and completely free. "This is what you feel, all the time," she said. "All of us." "All of you," he said. "Yeah." She floated there for another moment. Then she drifted down and wrapped her arms around him and pressed her face to his neck and he held her and the bond settled between them like something that had always been true. The daybreak unit arrived on a Monday morning. Izuku knew before anyone else because he felt it, the approach of something wrong, something carrying his ancestors' blood and weapons and equipment, a frequency that scraped against his awareness like a knife on glass. He was in the dormitory when he felt it, and he was moving before the gate intercom fired. By the time the intercom announced a commission warrant at the main gate, Izuku was dressed and downstairs and Momo was beside him, because the bond had woken her the moment he moved with purpose. Toga was already in position on the dormitory roof. She'd been sleeping there because she didn't have an assigned room yet and it hadn't come up. She sent a buzz of alert through the connection. The Daybreak unit was 6 people plus their leader. 5 of them were fully armored in black, carrying weapons that his senses told him were lined with something derived from UV-reactive compounds. The 6th was Hikari Solaris, and she was not in black. She was in white and gold, her hero costume, and she was beautiful and blazing and visibly, completely convinced of what she was doing. She had a commission warrant in her hand. She was holding it like a shield and a weapon simultaneously. Aizawa stood at the gate in his sleeping bag because Aizawa had either not gone to sleep or had gotten up with the same speed Izuku had, and he was holding the gate with the specific immovable quality he got when he decided something was not going to happen. Izuku stepped through the dormitory door and walked toward the gate, and felt rather than saw the women fall in behind him. Momo on his right, her arm already shaping something beneath her sleeve. Midnight to his left and slightly behind, the air around her subtly thicker with the quirk-enhanced pheromones she was releasing on a frequency that would start sedating the Daybreak unit's nervous systems in about 4 minutes without them noticing the onset. Ochaco behind Momo, hands free, fingers slightly spread. Jiro, whose bond had formed 3 days ago during a dorm emergency that Izuku had barely had time to process, was somewhere elevated and unseen, her enhanced earphone jacks probably already threaded into the ground. And Toga, on the rooftop, visible suddenly because she wanted to be, perched at the edge in her own shape, grinning down at the Daybreak unit with the specific grin of someone who found the situation excellent. Hikari Solaris looked at Izuku as he stopped inside the gate. She was genuinely impressive. The UV energy she generated came off her in waves, and standing at this distance, he could feel it on his skin, not burning, not yet, but a persistent awareness that the energy she carried was antithetical to his nature. She'd been specifically designed and trained to handle what he was. He gave her that. Midoriya Izuku, she said. Her voice was firm and professional. I have a warrant for your examination and assessment under Commission Resolution 0, related to the emergence of an unregistered non-quirk supernatural ability. She raised the warrant. Please come with me voluntarily. Examination, he said. Yes. That's what the warrant says. That's what, Midnight, he said, what does Resolution 0 historically authorize in terms of remediation options? Midnight's voice came from behind him, calm and professional, her teaching register. Resolution 0 has 3 authorized outcomes: registration, containment, or termination. A beat. There's no precedent for successful registration of a vampire-class bloodline. Containment is defined as indefinite secure isolation. And termination is, another beat. Self-explanatory. Hikari's jaw tightened slightly. You'll have all appropriate, you're here to dissect me, Izuku said. Not angrily. Stating a fact. Or to contain me indefinitely, which functionally means the same thing on a long enough timeline. That's what the warrant actually authorizes, regardless of what word it uses. The Commission has a responsibility to ensure. The Commission has been siphoning my ancestors' blood from a sealed facility for 100 years and using it to extend the lifespans of senior Commission personnel. He watched her face. Did they tell you that part? She went very still. The facility outside the city, he said. You have security clearance for it, I assume. You've been there. Did you ask what was inside? Her warrant hand dropped slightly. Just slightly. He saw it. The Commission built itself on a crime, he said. I'm not the threat. What they've been doing to the being in that facility is the threat. And what they created in that facility, he thought of the pseudo-vampires, the wrong teeth, the corrupted regeneration, is already attacking people. I don't, she stopped. I'm following a lawful, fight me, said Toga from the rooftop, cheerfully. We're not, Izuku started. She looks like she wants to fight, Toga continued. Let her fight. If she wins she can do her examination thing. If she doesn't, she shrugged expressively. Clearly the scary vampire boy can take care of himself. It was not the negotiation approach Izuku would have chosen. But Hikari Solaris was looking at him now with a different calculation in her eyes, not just a target assessment, but something more personal. She was thinking. Stand down your unit, she said to her team. Commander, one of them started. Stand down. She stepped forward, away from her unit, and the UV energy around her focused, coming inward, concentrating, blazing around her hands and her body like a second skin. One-on-one, she said to Izuku. If you can hold your own against a Daybreak commander, she paused. I'll reconsider the warrant. It wasn't quite legal. He suspected she knew that. He also suspected that she was a hero, fundamentally, and heroes tested things through action. One condition, he said. Nobody interferes regardless of outcome. This stays clean. He felt Toga's spike of protest through the bond. He sent back a firm pulse of no and felt her subside, grumbling, but compliant. Agreed, said Hikari. She moved fast. He moved faster. Her UV blasts came in concentrated beams that left scorch marks where they hit stone. He was already not there, moving at his full combat speed, which was an entirely different category of fast than anything a quirk-based hero had seen outside of top 5 hero level. He felt the burn when a beam caught his shoulder, genuine, meaningful, his regeneration working to counter it, and moved into shadow instinctively, then out of it at a different angle. She was good. She tracked his movement patterns faster than most could, adjusting her output to flood areas rather than target precisely, forcing him to keep moving rather than exploit the time her recharge needed. She was strong too. When she hit him with a palm-based UV burst at close range, he went through a stone pillar and came out the other side regenerating. He shook it off and looked at her and smiled. Her eyes widened slightly. She'd expected pain to slow him down. He came at her at 50%, not to hurt, but to show. Pure speed, raw physical force, vampiric precision. He went under her light and around it and over it and she was phenomenal at tracking but she couldn't quite catch what she couldn't quite follow, and when he stopped he had both her wrists held from behind her, her arms secured, his mouth next to her ear. I didn't use my quirk, he said. That was just me. A pause. You're not what I was told you were, she said. Her voice was steady but he could feel her heartbeat, not the spike of fear but something more complicated. Assessment. Recalibration. The specific sensation of someone who prided themselves on accuracy realizing their data was wrong. No, he agreed. He let her go. She stepped away and turned to face him, and the UV energy around her hands faded. She looked at him, really looked, the way people looked when they were trying to learn something rather than confirm something they already thought. The things that attacked the training exercise, she said. Not mine, he said. Someone else. Someone who accessed the facility and synthesized what they found there. Her jaw went tight. How long has someone had access? Don't know exactly. Long enough to produce that. He held her gaze. The Commission's secrets aren't staying secret anymore. And the thing they've been hiding in that facility is connected to more people dying if this continues. He paused. I need to deal with it. And I'm going to. The question is whether you're going to try to stop me. A long silence. Her unit behind her was at full attention, weapons ready, waiting for her signal. Aizawa at the gate hadn't moved a millimeter. I need time, Hikari said finally. How much? 72 hours. She met his eyes. Don't disappear. I'll be here, he said. She looked at him for another moment, then turned and walked back to her unit, said something low that he could hear clearly with his enhanced hearing but chose not to, and walked them back toward the gate. He watched them go. Momo appeared at his side. "She's going to verify the facility intel," Momo said quietly. "If she finds what's there, she'll either defect or she'll attack twice as hard because she needs to protect what the commission is." "Which do you think it'll be?" he said. Momo watched Hikari's retreating back. "I think she's a hero," she said. "I think heroes, when confronted with genuine evidence, tend to follow the evidence." A pause. "I've been wrong before." Midnight joined them. 72 hours is tight, she said. Because whoever is running those pseudo-vampire experiments isn't going to wait 72 hours. She looked at Izuku. "We need to move." He nodded. Through the bond network, he could feel all of them, Momo's strategic precision, Midnight's controlled urgency, Ochaco's steady readiness, Toga's coiled anticipation, Jiro's sharp-focused calm. His court. Not by decree. By choice, each of them, with eyes open and full knowledge. He looked at the city. He looked at the morning coming up over the buildings. He thought about the progenitor in the sealed facility, imprisoned for 100 years, being drained. He thought about the pseudo-vampires made from that stolen blood. He thought about whoever was responsible for those creatures. "Toga," he called up. "Yeah." She was still on the roof, legs dangling. "Can you get League intelligence on any large-scale black market medical operations running in the city? Anything that involves biological synthesis, unusual blood compounds, underground labs?" A pause while she thought. "Chisaki," she said. "Kai Chisaki. Shai Hasaikai. He's been running something for months," Shigaraki mentioned it a few times, "some kind of quirk elimination research that went sideways. There were rumors about experiments." She dropped off the roof and landed next to them with easy grace. "I might know where the secondary lab is." "Of course you do," said Jiro's voice from somewhere to the left, dry as sand. "I'm useful," Toga said serenely. Izuku looked at Momo. She was already thinking, he could feel it in the bond, the rapid model building, the resource assessment. "We move in 48 hours, he said. "That gives us time to plan and gives Hikari a partial window she asked for without giving her enough time to regroup and come back with something larger." He looked at each of them. "Get ready." And the thrall resonance hummed across all of them, present, warm, distinct for each one but woven together into something that was becoming, slowly and certainly, something new. Something that had never existed in quite this form before. A court. A family. A dynasty in its first morning. Izuku Midoriya looked at what he was building and felt the progenitor stir in his blood, patient, proud, and finally, after 100 years of a different kind of silence, something very close to at peace. Chapter 3, Blood Dynasty. The plan came together in 36 hours because Momo didn't sleep and neither did Izuku, and between the two of them they could cover the analytical ground that would have taken a full intelligence team a week. Toga's information on Chisaki's secondary lab was good, an industrial facility in the Narahata ward, registered to a shell company that Momo cracked in about 4 hours of financial forensics. The building had been pulling triple the standard industrial power load for 8 months, which was consistent with large-scale biological synthesis equipment. Underground access tunnels running from the city's maintenance network. Multiple registered personnel with falsified hero licenses. "Overhaul," Momo said, tapping the organizational chart she'd built on paper because she didn't trust digital right now. Kai Chisaki. He was operating a criminal organization with quirk-based medical research before his arrest. She looked up. He was released 6 months ago. The charges were reduced on a procedural technicality that had Yaoyorozu legal staff fingerprints all over it, which means someone with serious resources engineered his release. "Commission?" Midnight said. "Commission adjacent. Someone who wanted him out and working." Momo's expression was flat. If they gave him access to the facility research as incentive, he could have been running these experiments for months, Izuku finished. And the pseudo-vampires we encountered were not the final product, Momo said. They were test iterations. Whatever he's been working toward, we interrupted it before it was complete. Toga was lying on the floor with her legs up against the wall, looking at the ceiling. Chisaki's obsessive, she said. He's not going to stop because of a setback. He'll accelerate. She rolled her head sideways to look at them. He's probably already accelerated. Jiro, sitting cross-legged on the couch with headphones around her neck, said, so we go in before his next test run happens in a populated area. 48 hours from the daybreak encounter, Izuku said. We move tonight. Mirko arrived at the compound at 3 in the afternoon and announced herself by kicking the front gate hard enough to dent it. Rumi Usajiyama was, even by the standards of the pro-hero world, a specific kind of force of nature. She was the number 5 hero and she operated alone because nobody could keep up with her, and she'd found out about Izuku through a chain of events that started with her monitoring commission communications as a professional habit and ended with her watching the footage of the daybreak encounter from a camera Aizawa hadn't known about. She'd shown up because she wanted to see for herself. Izuku opened the gate and she looked at him with the particular assessing look of a fighter meeting another fighter, top to bottom, weight and stance and the way he occupied space. You're the vampire thing, she said. I'm Izuku, he said. You hit that commission commander through a stone pillar. She hit me with a UV burst first. Mirko grinned. It was the grin of someone who had found something worth paying attention to. I've been watching the commission do sketchy things for 2 years, she said. I don't have the patience for politics and I don't have the connections for intelligence work and I fight alone so I've just been, she made a frustrated gesture. Watching. Waiting for someone to actually do something. Her eyes were sharp. You're doing something. Tonight, he said. I want in. He studied her. The vampiric sense read her clearly, raw power, genuine, no deception in her at all. No political motive. Pure fighter's instinct recognizing a conflict worth having and a leader worth following, and she'd follow no one who couldn't match her on the field. Can you follow orders in a combat situation, he said. Her eyebrow went up. Can you give orders worth following? Yes, he said. She looked at him for another 3 seconds. Probably yeah, she said, about the orders. She came inside. Toga greeted her by appearing from nowhere and saying, you have really cool ears, and Mirko looked at her for a full second before deciding, apparently, that this was fine. They went in at 2 in the morning. 6 of them, Izuku, Toga, Momo, Mirko, and 2 others, Midnight, who insisted, and Ochaco, who also insisted and then demonstrated her current quirk capacity by lifting a 2-ton section of wall to prove the point. Nobody argued after that. Jiro stayed at the compound as their sensor array, her earphone jacks threaded across the city's electrical and acoustic infrastructure, feeding them real-time data through a communication setup Momo had assembled from component parts. She could hear everything within a kilometer of the facility and would flag any external threat. The tunnel entry point was in a maintenance access 3 blocks from the building. Toga went first because Toga went first in any infiltration situation, transformed into a face from the Commission's employee database that she'd pulled from Izuku's progenitor dreams, one of the researchers, gone from the city 8 months ago. If anyone inside saw her on a security feed before they were ready, they'd see a familiar face. The tunnels smelled like wrong blood. Izuku felt it immediately, the same corrupted frequency as the pseudo-vampires, but thicker here, more concentrated, the smell of a place where that process had been ongoing for months. His jaw tightened. Momo put a hand on his arm briefly. She felt what he was feeling through the bond. Controlled, she said quietly. One word. Enough. He nodded. Controlled. The facility interior was larger than the external footprint suggested, they'd expanded underground, levels dropping below the registered basement into excavated space that had taken serious resources to create. The first level was laboratory space, clean, ordered, lit with the particular blue-white of medical environments. Equipment that cost more than most hero agencies' annual budgets, arranged with the obsessive precision of someone who thought disorder was a moral failing. Overhaul. They found the first guards on the second sublevel, and Toga handled them with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for years, 2 rapid transformations, 2 guards who never understood what happened. Momo secured them. Ochaco made them weightless for transport to a containment position. Clean. The third sublevel was where the experiments were. Izuku stopped at the entrance and stood there for a moment with both hands braced on the doorframe, because what he saw through the reinforced glass observation window needed a moment. Rows of containment units. Inside them, people, or things that had been people, in various stages of transformation. Some looked almost normal, just pale, with the early signs of wrong blood, the slight wrongness around the eyes, the beginning of the dental changes. Others were further along, the process having run its course into something that barely resembled its origin. And others were motionless, the transformation having killed them, their bodies preserved in the units like specimens. 23 units total. Jiro, he said into the comm, I'm here. Her voice was tight. She'd been listening to the facility audio for the past hour. I know. Are any of them salvageable? A pause. 7 of them have stable vitals. The corruption is early stage. If you can interrupt whatever process is driving the transformation, they're stolen blood, he said. If I can pull it out of them the way I did with the pseudo-vampires, you don't know if you can do that for 23 people simultaneously, Momo said behind him. No, he agreed. I don't know that. He straightened. But the ones in the early stage deserve a chance. He looked at Momo. Can you synthesize a containment compound? Something to slow the transformation process? She was already thinking, he could feel it. I need 15 minutes and a sterile workspace. You've got 10. Mirko, Ochaco, watched the corridor. Toga, already gone, came her voice from somewhere ahead, because she'd moved without being asked. He felt her through the bond, focused, purposeful, deeper into the facility. He pushed the lab door open and walked in. Chisaki found them. Or rather, Toga found Chisaki, which had been the plan, except the plan had assumed Chisaki would be in the secondary lab and not standing in the primary lab on sublevel 4 with a version of himself that made Izuku's vampiric senses slam into high alert the moment he came within range. The alert came through the bond first, Toga's spike of adrenaline, sharp and specific, cutting through everything else. Izuku was moving before she said a word. He came through the sublevel 4 door and saw them. Kai Chisaki had always been precise. That had been the baseline, the obsessive precision, the control, the plague doctor mask and the careful gloves because disorder was the enemy and physical contact was the vector of disorder. The Chisaki that stood in sublevel 4's primary lab had abandoned that. His mask was gone. His gloves were gone. And his hands were doing something that hands shouldn't do, the knuckles restructuring visibly as his overhaul quirk ran continuously, his body in a permanent state of being taken apart and put back together as the stolen blood fought his system and his system fought back. His eyes were crimson, not the deep warm crimson of Izuku's, but the flat total crimson of the pseudo-vampires, the color of something that had taken on power without the context to hold it correctly. He was looking at Toga, who had backed to the wall with 2 of her knives out and was calculating angles with the focus speed of someone very good in a bad position. You, Chisaki said. His voice had changed, the precise diction still there but something layered underneath it, a harmonic that didn't belong to human vocal cords. You're bonded to him. He tilted his head. I can smell the connection. The stolen frequency. Nothing stolen, Toga said. Unlike what you've been doing for 8 months. Borrowed. He looked at his hands, watching them restructure and restructure. The blood in that facility was going to waste. The Commission used it for their own purposes, selfish, small purposes. Longevity treatments for bureaucrats. His voice held contempt so deep it had become geology. I used it for something that actually mattered. Evolution. The next step beyond quirks, those are people in those units, Izuku said from the doorway. Chisaki turned. Met his eyes across 30 feet of laboratory space and paused. The flat crimson of his gaze processed what it was seeing, genuine, authentic, awakened. Something the synthesized version in his bloodstream would never be and could never produce. The reaction was complex and immediate: hunger, revulsion, fury, and beneath all of it, the specific devastation of someone who had pursued a thing and was now standing across from what that thing actually was, knowing they'd missed it completely. The real thing, Chisaki said. Quiet. Specific. The real thing, Izuku confirmed. Then you understand what I was trying to do. And this was the frustrating part, the part that made Chisaki not a simple villain, that made him something harder. His voice carried genuine conviction. The quirk system is a ceiling. It was always a ceiling. The people at the top of the ranking maintain their position not through genuine superiority but through regulatory control. They define what power counts and then count only the power that suits them. His restructuring hands gestured at the laboratory around them. Vampire blood operates outside that system entirely. An ability that predates the rules can't be bounded by the rules. I was trying to create people who were finally, genuinely free of the ceiling. You were killing them, Izuku said. Casualties of, stop. He said it flat and hard. Don't dress it up. You know what you were doing. You know what's in those units on sublevel 3. Chisaki went silent. His hands restructured. His jaw tightened. Here's what I think happened, Izuku said, and he walked into the room, not fast, just walking, because the moment called for clarity, not combat yet. You had a real insight. The quirk system as a power structure that maintains itself through regulatory control, yes, that's real. The Commission's suppression of non-quirk bloodlines is real. What you saw in those sealed archives is real. He stopped 15 feet from Chisaki. And then you decided the insight justified the method. And the method was taking people and filling them with stolen blood and watching what happened, and when what happened was wrong, you called it iterative. You can't make a point without getting to the method, Izuku said. Yes you can. The insight is valid. The method was torture. He held Chisaki's flat crimson gaze. And the method has to stop. You can't stop what's already. He moved. 60% of one for all through his vampiric body was a different category of event than it had ever been before the awakening. He crossed 15 feet before Chisaki's overhaul quirk could register a target to deconstruct, and the first strike went into Chisaki's lead arm, not the arm itself but the space beside it, a pressure wave that bent the arm back without touching it and disrupted the continuous restructuring long enough to break his rhythm. Chisaki reconstructed and swung with the other arm, his quirk deconstructing the air itself in the strike's path. Izuku was already moving, under it, to the right, the vampiric speed making him a blur that the deconstruction field tracked but couldn't quite reach. He felt the edge of the field touch his left shoulder and felt it begin to work, a wrongness, a cellular disruption, and his regeneration slammed back against it, the two abilities fighting each other in the tissue of his shoulder while he kept moving. Pain. Real pain, not the managed ache of training. He used it. Let it clarify. Chisaki was powerful, the synthesized vampire blood had given him enhanced speed and regeneration on top of his overhaul quirk, and the combination meant he could deconstruct incoming strikes faster than most could deliver them and reconstruct himself faster than most could damage him. But the regeneration was wrong. It was always slightly wrong, the tissues rebuilding out of optimal order, the corruption visible in the seams of the reconstruction. He couldn't handle high-volume damage, Izuku realized. The synthesis couldn't keep up with real output. He shifted to 70%. The air pressure from his movement alone started cracking the laboratory's wall surfaces. Chisaki had to track multiple vectors simultaneously, incoming Izuku, the pressure waves preceding him, the environmental disruption of moving at that speed in an enclosed space. His quirk reached for Izuku again and again and caught air, caught wall, caught equipment, deconstructing everything it touched into base matter. Izuku took a hit at 70%, Chisaki's palm to his chest, overhaul triggering, and the deconstruction chewed into his sternum for 2 seconds before his regeneration and vampiric cellular integrity pushed back hard enough to arrest it. It felt like his chest was being unmade from the inside out. He broke Chisaki's wrist on the way through, got 3 steps of distance, regenerated the sternum damage in 5 seconds of white-hot cellular work, and came back. "You can't," Chisaki started. Izuku hit him with a Delaware smash at 75%. The air pressure struck Chisaki like a wall, not touching him, bypassing his quirk's physical deconstruction entirely because it was pressure, not matter, and sent him through the back wall of the laboratory and into the maintenance corridor behind it. The impact was enormous. Chisaki hit the far wall of the corridor and left an impression in the reinforced concrete. He got up. Of course he got up, the stolen blood's regeneration, wrong as it was still regeneration. But his reconstructed arms were shaking. The synthesis couldn't rebuild at the rate Izuku was damaging. Izuku stood in the hole in the wall and looked at him. "I can do this all night," Izuku said, and he meant it. His regeneration was faster than anything Chisaki had accessed. His body could handle the output Chisaki couldn't survive. "Or we stop here." Chisaki's flat crimson eyes were calculating. Even now, even like this, the man was calculating, and arriving, Izuku watched him arrive, at the reality of the numbers. "You're going to take it back," Chisaki said. "Not a question." "The blood that isn't yours," Izuku said. "Yes. If you take it, you'll lose the power." "Yes." He walked toward Chisaki slowly. "And you'll face legal consequences for what you did to those people upstairs." "Yes." He stopped over him. "But you'll be alive. And you'll have the insight, the actual insight, which is real and valid, to do something with that doesn't involve hurting people." Chisaki looked up at him. There was something in the flat crimson eyes, beneath the wrongness of the stolen blood, beneath the obsession, that was almost grief. "I was so close," he said. "You were never close," Izuku said. "You were looking at the right thing from completely the wrong direction." He reached down and pressed his hand against Chisaki's chest, and pulled. The technique came from the progenitor's memories, not a skill he practiced but a knowledge that had transferred with the blood, the understanding of how to reach into someone who carried his ancestors' stolen blood and reclaim it. It wasn't gentle. It felt, from the outside, like watching someone's body perform a systematic audit of itself, and from the inside, based on the sound Chisaki made, like something essential being carefully and completely removed. The stolen blood answered him. It recognized what it was being called back to, the true bloodline, the source, and came. Chisaki's crimson eyes faded. The continuous restructuring of his hands stopped. The enhanced speed and regeneration dropped away. His overhaul quirk remained, it was his, it had always been his. Izuku took nothing that wasn't his to take, but without the synthesized vampire blood amplifying it, he was again a man with a powerful but bounded quirk and 2 broken arms. He lay on the corridor floor and didn't try to get up. "I could have changed things," he said. "Maybe you still can," Izuku said. "Differently." The reclaimed blood hit him like a wave. Not painful, the opposite of painful. His veins lit up, the luminosity visible through his skin, and the progenitor's frequency in his blood sang a note he'd never heard before. Louder. Closer. Like moving from the lobby to the room itself. Momo felt it through the bond and came at a run, arriving in the corridor entrance with Mirko 2 steps behind her, both of them taking in the scene, Chisaki down, Izuku standing, his veins glowing, with very different expressions. Mirko's was electric with satisfaction. Momo's was relief so deep it read as physical. "Sublevel 5, said Jiro's voice in their earpieces. "There's a sublevel 5. I'm getting structural readings, it's not on any blueprint. The access has to be in that lab." Izuku looked at the ruined laboratory. His luminous veins pulsed once. He already knew where the access was. He could feel it, the pull that had been in his dreams for weeks, now close enough to be specific, directional, a thread in his blood pointing down. He found the access panel behind a sealed refrigeration unit, a biometric lock that keyed to the synthesized blood Chisaki had been using. With the reclaimed blood in him, the lock read him as what it was actually looking for and opened. The stairs going down were old. Older than everything else in the facility, older than the facility itself, as if the building had been constructed around them rather than the other way around. The walls were stone, not concrete, and they carried the specific ambient quality of something that had been sealed and sealed and sealed again over a very long time. Mirko started down after him. He stopped and looked at her. "Just me," he said. She looked back, and for a moment he thought she'd argue. This was Mirko, arguing was her natural state. But something in his face, or in what she'd seen tonight, made her step back. 2 minutes, she said. "Then I'm coming in regardless." He went down. The chamber at the bottom was circular and absolutely silent in the specific way of places that had been undisturbed for a century. The ceiling arrays on the walls were elaborate, patterns he recognized from the progenitor's memories, drawn in substances he didn't want to think too carefully about and reinforced with technology that had been layered on top over decades as each successive generation of commission personnel found new methods to ensure the seal held. At the center was a figure. The progenitor was not what he'd expected. The dreams had given him fragments, power, scale, age, and he'd constructed something monstrous from those fragments. What he found instead was someone who looked, in the essential structure of his face, like family. The lineage was visible in the bones, in the particular set of the eyes. He was larger than Izuku, the build of someone from a time when physical scale was survival, and he was clearly, deeply, desperately depleted, the siphoning of a century visible in the hollowed quality of his stillness, the almost paper-thin presence of his sealed existence. But his eyes were open. Had been open, probably, for a very long time. Izuku crouched at the edge of the ceiling array and looked at him. "I found you," he said. The response came through blood. Not sound, not language, a resonance, a transfer, the same channel the dreams had used but now immediate and direct and enormous. The progenitor's consciousness was intact, 100 years of imprisonment hadn't broken it, it had deepened it, the way pressure deepens stone. He was patient in a way that made patience itself seem like a young concept. The memories came fast and complete, the world before quirks, the court of bonded women, not wives, not possessions, companions by genuine mutual choice, the communities they'd built. The blood bonds creating networks of genuine connection rather than control. The first generation of quirk users, the fear that came with new power, the systematic decision to eliminate anything that operated outside the new taxonomy. The purge. The betrayal. The sealing. And then the long patience. And then the pull, recent, welcome, as his descendants' blood woke up and bonded and built and grew closer with every connection made. He showed Izuku the choice the way you show someone a door. Not a push, a door. On one side, the seal breaks, the progenitor rises, the full vampire bloodline reactivates in every descendant worldwide. Power restored. Legacy continued. War inevitable. On the other side, the progenitor's remaining power transfers. He chooses his end. Izuku carries what he was, forward into what Izuku will build. Not restoration, evolution. Izuku sat with it for 30 seconds. Then he said, "Rest." Not as a command, as an acknowledgement. The progenitor had been doing his waiting for 100 years and it was done and he could stop. The power came. It didn't feel like being struck by lightning or hit by a wave or any of the dramatic physical metaphors that came to mind afterward. It felt like a key turning. Like the last piece of something finding its slot. Every vampiric ability he had deepened simultaneously, the senses expanded to a range that briefly overwhelmed him before his mind caught up and calibrated, the strength settled into a permanence rather than a capacity he called on, the bond resonance sharpened until he could feel all his bonded women simultaneously with a clarity that was almost sight. He could feel Momo at the top of the stairs, her hand on the railing, her heart doing something rapid and certain. He could feel Toga in the corridor outside, vibrating with something she didn't have a clean word for. Midnight, above, with the composed exterior and the genuine feeling running beneath it like a current. Ochaco, floating slightly without meaning to, trying to ground herself. Jiro, kilometers away at the compound, suddenly dropping her headphones because the acoustic sensitivity of their bond had just tripled and the city sounded like a symphony. Mirko at the chamber entrance, 2 minutes having elapsed, poised at the threshold. The progenitor was still. Completely still. Whatever had animated him, the patient waiting, the ancient hope, had transferred and released, and what remained was simply the piece of a long work finally done. Izuku stood. His eyes, when he looked at his reflection in the polished surface of one of the ceiling arrays, had completed their shift, deep crimson with flecks of gold, the eyes of something that wasn't quite what he'd been and wasn't quite what the progenitor had been either. Something new in between. He felt his bonded women all simultaneously, burning bright and real and present. He walked back up the stairs. Mirko was waiting at the top with her arms crossed and an expression of forced patience. She looked at his eyes and her own went sharp. "You got bigger," she said. "Somehow. You're the same size but you got bigger." "I got more complete," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Fight me." "Not right now." "Soon." "Soon," he agreed. The facility came apart over the next 2 hours in a sequence that Momo orchestrated with the precision of someone who had been planning for exactly this contingency. The experiments on sublevel 3 were addressed, 7 people in early-stage transformation received the intervention, Izuku reclaiming the stolen blood, his touch gentle and specific for each person, the wrong frequency leaving their systems and the transformation arresting. They'd need medical support and time, but they'd be themselves again. The others, the ones the process had taken too far, he sat with for a moment, individually, his hand on the glass of each sealed unit. He didn't have anything to give them except acknowledgement. He gave that. The evidence was extensive and Momo photographed every page, every sample, every record. It went to 6 separate secure locations through 6 separate channels, legal contacts, journalists, hero agency representatives she personally trusted, and an international human rights organization her family had supported for years. Before it went anywhere public, 1 copy went to Hikari Solaris. She asked for time, Momo said when Izuku looked at her. "Give her the information that will make her use it correctly." They were outside the facility, the first gray of pre-dawn touching the sky, when Izuku's phone received a response. Not a call. A text from an unknown number that resolved, when Momo ran it, to a commission-registered secure line. "I've verified the facility. I've verified everything." A pause between messages. "I need to see you." Momo showed him the message and then looked at him. "She moves fast." "She's a hero," he said. "You said heroes follow the evidence." "I also said I've been wrong before." But Momo was almost smiling. He texted back a location, not the facility, not the compound, a neutral site, a park, open ground, in 2 hours. Then he put his phone away and looked at his people. Toga was leaning against the building wall, knives put away, watching the pre-dawn with something on her face that he'd come to recognize as her thinking expression, the one that looked like she was calculating something delicious but was actually just her at peace. Momo was reviewing her phone, probably already drafting the initial communications to her legal contacts. Mirko was doing pull-ups on a structural beam that shouldn't have supported her weight but apparently did. Ochaco had her arms around herself and was looking at the sky with an expression of profound relief. Midnight stood slightly apart, her public face entirely gone, just herself in the early morning. They all felt his attention shift to them through the bond. Looked at him, each in their own way. "We need to move on the commission next," he said. Chisaki was enabled. "That has to have a reckoning." The evidence Momo documented will do most of it, Midnight said. Once it's in enough hands, the Commission can't suppress it without making the suppression itself a larger story. She paused. Vesper will try, but she'll be containing a flood with her hands. How long? Izuku said. Days, Momo said. Maybe a week. I've structured the release so each day adds more, starts with the experiments, then the facility, then the blood siphoning, then the suppression history, then resolution 0. She looked up. By the end of the week, the Commission's current leadership will be facing criminal investigation by bodies they don't control. And Vesper? A pause. Vesper is the architect of a 100-year institutional crime, Momo said carefully. She'll face prosecution. Whether that prosecution succeeds depends on how much of the infrastructure she controls remains loyal when the evidence is public. She met his eyes. We'll see. He nodded. Then, the compound. We're making it permanent. I was wondering when you'd commit to that, Momo said, and in her voice was something that was entirely not professional, warm and teasing and real. I've been thinking about it, he said. For how long? Since you offered it. She shook her head slightly. A smile she didn't bother hiding. I'll make the arrangements today. Hikari Solaris arrived at the park exactly 2 hours later, alone, which was either trust or tactical confidence in herself, and either way Izuku respected it. She was out of her hero costume, civilian clothes, her UV energy suppressed to baseline, looking like a person rather than a weapon. She sat across from him on a park bench in the gray morning and looked at the grass for a moment before she spoke. I've been with the Commission for 9 years, she said. I became a hero because I believed in protecting people from things that could hurt them. I was recruited to Daybreak because my quirk was identified as specifically effective against what you are. She looked up. I was told you were dangerous. A destabilizing element. Something that the public needed to be protected from. And now, he said. Now I've seen the facility. Her jaw tightened. Now I've read Chisaki's research, which he stole from Commission archives, which means the Commission had it, which means everything I was told about why you're dangerous was constructed from a lie. A pause. The Commission has been the dangerous thing. For 100 years. Yes. What did you find downstairs? In the sealed chamber. My ancestor, he said. Kept alive and used as a resource for a century. He's not anymore. He met her eyes. He's at rest. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it, he could hear it. What are you going to do, he said. I have 8 people in my unit, she said. They followed my orders to your dormitory in good faith. They believed the same things I believed. She looked at him steadily. I owe them the truth before they hear it from a news cycle. A pause. After that, I don't know exactly. Probably my career in the Commission is over regardless. You can't unknow what I know. You could work with me, he said. She looked at him sharply. You're proposing, I'm building something, he said. Not a hero agency. Not a villain organization. Something that operates in the space between the system and outside it. I need people who understand both. I literally just tried to bring you in for examination, she said. And then you stopped when you had reason to, he said. That matters more than the first part. She sat with that for a long moment. The park was waking up, birds, distant traffic, the smell of early morning city. She looked at her hands, which were ordinary without the UV glow around them, just hands. Not a bond, she said carefully. No, he said. Not unless you want that. Not unless you genuinely want that. That's never been how it works. He held her gaze. You just be an ally. Someone who believes the right things and is willing to act on them. She was quiet for another long moment. Then she said, tell me what you're building. The compound was a Yaoyorozu property 40 minutes from the city, large enough to house them comfortably, with defensible grounds and enough space that people had room to be themselves without being on top of each other. It had been sitting empty for 2 years, which meant nothing in the building recognized them and everything in the building could be made theirs. The move took 1 day. Less than a day, actually, because Mirko did everything at speed and Toga found the process of establishing a new territory so inherently interesting that she was basically everywhere simultaneously, and Ochaco eliminated the physical labor of moving heavy items by simply making them weightless. Izuku stood at the entrance in the late afternoon and watched his people fill the space, and felt them through the bond, each individual warmth, each distinct presence. Momo directing the setup of the main room with the focus of someone who'd been thinking about this layout since the first day she offered the compound. Toga discovering a window seat that she immediately claimed as hers, probably permanently. Midnight in the library, looking at the shelves with genuine pleasure. Ochaco floating above the courtyard, testing the range of her expanded gravity field. Jiro setting up an audio system in the main room with the particular satisfaction of someone given a technical problem they actually wanted to solve. Mirko came to stand next to him. She'd been doing this intermittently since the facility, checking his position, checking what was in his face. Figuring him out. "You're building a house," she said. "A home," he said. "What's the difference?" He thought about it. A house is structural. A home is what happens when people choose to be in it. She looked out at the courtyard where Ochaco was floating. "She's been floating for 3 hours," she said. "Her quirk control is expanding," he said. "She's getting used to the range. Is that going to happen to me?" "Direct, no performance around it." He looked at her. "The bond enhances what's already there." For Momo it was production speed. For Jiro it was range and sensitivity. For Toga, he paused. For Toga it was accessing quirks through blood samples. For you, he considered what he knew of her quirk, her speed, her destructive output. "I don't know exactly. But it'll be yours. Just more." She was quiet for a moment. "I've never needed help before," she said. "I've never wanted a," she gestured at the compound, at the people in it. "I operate alone. Always." "You don't have to stop," he said. "The bond doesn't make you less. It doesn't make you need me. It just makes you feel what's real between us." "And what's real between us," she said. He looked at her, her directness, her power, the complete absence of performance in her. She was exactly what she presented because she'd never seen a reason to be anything else. That honesty was its own kind of extraordinary. "Respect," he said. "Genuine respect. And something that's been growing since the facility." He met her eyes. "You saw me at full output and you didn't step back. You stepped forward and asked to fight me." "I like the strongest thing in the room," she said, without embarrassment. "I know," he said. "And I like someone who isn't afraid of what I am." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she held out her arm, not a wrist, her forearm, in the specific way of someone offering something significant rather than token. "Make it count," she said. He took her arm with appropriate seriousness. And bit. Mirko's response to the bond formation was the most physically dramatic of any of them. Her legs left the ground entirely, her body surging with the enhanced output of her quirk, a kick delivered reflexively into the air that shattered a chunk of masonry from the compound wall without her consciously directing it. She came back to earth with her eyes blazing and her breath coming hard and her entire physical presence somehow even more overwhelming than before. She grabbed his shirt with both hands. Not aggression, something more complicated, the specific overwhelm of someone who didn't process emotion through conversation. "I can feel them," she said, meaning the others. "All of them." She stopped. Her jaw worked. "That's a lot." "It gets easier to sort," he said. She held his shirt for another moment. Then she let go and stepped back and rolled her shoulders, recalibrating. Through the fresh bond he felt her, the raw power, the fierce independence, the specific loneliness of being too much for every environment she'd ever moved through. And underneath that, something soft and furious and almost shy, the part of Rumi Usajiyama that had always wanted to be known by something that could actually handle knowing her. "Don't make it weird," she said. "Wasn't going to," he said. "Good." She looked at the broken masonry. "I'll fix that." "You don't have to, I broke it," she said simply, and went to deal with it, because that was who she was. Jiro called at sundown. Not through the bond, through her phone, actual voice, because Jiro communicated directly when she had something direct to say. "Vesper's moving," she said. "I've been monitoring commission frequency traffic since this morning. She knows about Chisaki's defeat. She knows the evidence is out. Momo's first release hit 3 news organizations in the last hour." A pause. "She's not running. She's consolidating. She's pulling every loyal resource she has and she's going to make a countermove." "What kind of countermove?" Momo said. She'd appeared beside Izuku the moment the call came through, drawn by the bond's alert flag. "I can't tell from frequency traffic alone," Jiro said. "But she's moving fast and she's calling in every favor she has." A beat. "There's a name coming up in the traffic. All for one." The temperature in the compound seemed to drop slightly. "AFO is in Tartarus," Midnight said from across the room. She'd heard through the bond link. "He's in Tartarus," Jiro confirmed. "But someone with commission-level access has been visiting him. Regularly, over the past 4 months." Another pause. "I think Vesper's been consulting with him. I think she's been asking him how to handle you." Izuku sat with that. All for one. Older than most things, powerful beyond most categories, with a specific and well-documented interest in abilities that fell outside normal parameters. Of course he'd known about the vampire bloodlines. Of course he'd been watching. And of course, watching Izuku build a power base independent of every existing structure, he'd see an opportunity. "He'll make contact," Izuku said. "Probably," Momo agreed. She was thinking, he could feel it, the rapid model building. "He'll want to offer an alliance that serves him. He'll frame it as serving you." She looked at him. "He's patient enough to let the commission weaken us first and then present himself as the alternative." "He underestimates what we've built," Izuku said. "He's never seen a bond network at full development," Midnight said, joining them. "Everything he knows about vampire bloodlines is from records of the progenitor's court, which operated differently." She looked at Izuku steadily. "What you've built isn't what the progenitor had. It's different. It's," she searched for the word. "Consensual at a level the records don't document. The women in the historical courts bonded because the king was the most powerful thing available. Your court bonded because they wanted to," Ochaco said quietly from the doorway. She drifted in during the conversation, and she was looking at Izuku with warm certainty. "Because he's him. Not because of the power." Izuku looked at her. At all of them, Momo with her strategy, Midnight with her knowledge, Ochaco with her heart, Toga perched on a windowsill looking simultaneously casual and entirely focused, Mirko leaning against the far wall with her arms crossed and her newly bonded presence thrumming in the network, Jiro's voice carrying through the phone. "All for one can wait," he said. "Vesper can wait. Tonight we establish the compound and tomorrow we deal with whatever comes." He looked at Momo. She looked back with something he'd come to love, the way her face moved when she was certain of something. "The legal release continues on schedule," she said. "By morning, the Commission's senior leadership will be responding to inquiries from 6 different government bodies. Vesper will be too busy to make a decisive move before her credibility is destroyed." "And if she makes a move anyway," Mirko said. "Then we deal with it," Izuku said simply. "Together." The word settled into the compound's air and didn't echo, it absorbed, became part of the space, became something the compound held now along with everything else they'd brought into it. The night was warm and the compound's main hall had been arranged by Momo's careful direction into something that was simultaneously functional and inhabited, somewhere between a headquarters and a home, because she understood that they needed both and hadn't seen a reason to choose. Jiro had set up music that filled the space without overwhelming it. Toga had produced, from sources she declined to specify, enough food to feed everyone twice over. Mirko had found the compound's small training space and approved of it audibly. Midnight had claimed a corner of the library as her working space and was already reading something that looked historical. Ochaco and Momo were in a conversation in the kitchen that had started logistical and become something warmer. He could feel the shift through both their bonds. Izuku sat in the center of the hall on a low couch that faced the open courtyard doors, the evening air coming through, and let himself just feel the compound for a moment. All 6 bonds, clear and present and individual. Each one distinct, Momo like deep water, Toga like electricity, Midnight like a controlled burn, Ochaco like morning, Jiro like a clean note held steady, Mirko like a frequency too high and too real. All of them there. All of them his, and he theirs, in the specific mutual way the bond operated that wasn't ownership and wasn't obligation but was something that didn't have a clean word and didn't need one. Toga dropped onto the couch beside him with zero ceremony. "You're doing the feeling everyone thing," she said. "Is it obvious?" "Your face goes," she demonstrated, a look of absorbed internal attention that was a remarkably accurate impression. He laughed. "I'm still getting used to the depth of it," he said. "Since the facility." "It's more," she agreed. She folded her legs up beneath her and leaned into his side. "I can feel it too. Everyone's more present." She was quiet for a moment. "Is this what you are now? Final form, no more surprises?" "Probably more surprises," he said. "Good," she said immediately. "I'd be bored otherwise." Momo came in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs and handed one to Izuku with the particular attentiveness of someone who'd internalized what he needed without making a performance of knowing it. She sat on his other side with the ease of someone settling into a space that was theirs. The 2 of them, Toga on his left, Momo on his right, looked at each other briefly over him. Something had been developing between them in the past week, neither of them announcing it, both of them simply building it interaction by interaction. It wasn't the same thing either of them had with Izuku, it was its own thing, specific to them, the specific chemistry of 2 people who were fundamentally opposite in most surface qualities and fundamentally compatible in the ways that mattered. "Toga," Momo said. "Yaoyorozu," Toga said. "Momo," Momo corrected. A pause. Then Toga's smile, the real one, not the manic one. "Momo." Izuku looked at the courtyard. The evening was settling into proper night, the city's light pollution giving the sky a glow that his enhanced eyes turned into something almost beautiful. He could hear the city's heartbeats at the edge of his range, thousands of them, the ambient life of the place he'd grown up in, the place he'd promised himself he'd protect. He was still going to protect it. That hadn't changed. If anything it had crystallized, he had something to protect now that was specific and real and present in 6 living connections that hummed in his chest. Midnight came in from the library with a book and sat across from them, crossing her legs and opening the book and then not reading it, just being there, which was its own kind of statement. Ochaco floated in, literally floated, her feet 6 inches off the ground, her quirk still calibrating to its new range, and settled next to Midnight with the specific contentment of someone who had arrived somewhere they'd been looking for. Mirko came in last, from the training space, slightly sweaty and looking satisfied. She sat on the floor because there wasn't enough couch space and the floor was fine. She looked at the arrangement of them, the hall, the bonds, the evening, and said nothing, which for Mirko was its own kind of acceptance. Jiro's voice came through the speaker system, "The first news cycle is running." It's, a pause. "It's big. They're leading with the experimental subjects. It's going to be everywhere by morning." "Good," Momo said. "Vesper's going to lose her mind," Jiro said, with something that was almost satisfaction. "She's already losing it," Izuku said. She just doesn't know it yet. From somewhere in the compound's newer digital infrastructure, a notification chimed. Momo's secure channel, flagged priority. She checked it and went still for just a moment, the stillness that meant something significant. Nijire Hado, she said. 3rd year, UA. She's been asking around about you for 3 days and she's just sent me a message through an academic network channel that's impressively hard to trace. She looked up. She says she has questions. About what? Toga said. Momo met Izuku's eyes. Through the bond, he felt her amusement, dry and warm and entirely hers. About everything, she said. She uses the word everything 3 times in the message. And she ends with, also I've been feeling something for about a week and I think I know what it is and I think it leads to wherever Midoriya Izuku currently is. Silence in the compound hall for a moment. Then Toga said, she can feel the bloodline calling. Apparently, Momo said. Izuku looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at his court, his family, arranged around the main hall of their new home in the evening light, each of them carrying his mark and he theirs, the thrall resonance warm and present and growing. He thought about All for One watching from Tartarus. He thought about Vesper consolidating. He thought about the world outside shifting in response to everything he'd set in motion, the information Momo had released, the facility exposed, the experiment stopped, the century-long crime becoming public in real time. He thought about Nijire Hado following a biological resonance through a city to find him, about the progenitor's bloodline in his veins reaching outward toward compatible frequencies, about the network he was building one genuine connection at a time. He thought about what Momo had said on the rooftop. Then let's make it legendary. Tell her to come, he said. Momo typed the response. Sent it. Set her phone down and picked up her mug and looked at him over the rim with the particular look that was just for him, stripped of every layer of the Yaoyorozu air and every layer of the class VP, just her, brilliant and fierce and more herself than she'd been at any point before the training ground 3 weeks ago. You know this gets more complicated from here, she said. I know, he said. All for one. The Commission's countermove. The public reaction to the news cycle. More people coming. She held his gaze. This isn't the end of the dangerous part. No, he agreed. Are you ready? He felt all of them, every bond, every presence. He felt the progenitor's power settled into his blood, complete and still and available. He felt one for all integrated cleanly into his vampiric body, 2 impossible things that somehow made more sense together than they'd ever made separately. He felt the compound around them, solid, defensible, theirs. He looked at Momo and felt her. He looked at Toga, who was looking at the ceiling and humming something toneless and private and present. He looked at Midnight, whose eyes were on him over the edge of her book. Ochaco, who smiled immediately when their eyes met. Mirko, who gave him a short nod from the floor that meant more than it looked like. Jiro, who he could feel through the bond even at distance, her music, her steadiness, her reluctant and genuine warmth. Yeah, he said. Momo leaned into his right side. Toga pressed against his left. The evening settled around the compound. In the city, the first news cycle was breaking. In Tartarus, a man who had stolen 1,000 abilities smiled at a ceiling. On a commission server, a woman in white was making calls with increasing desperation. And in a compound 40 minutes from the city, a king who had chosen love over conquest and connection over control and evolution over restoration sat in the home he was building and felt the lives that had chosen to orbit his like something that had always been possible and had needed only the right person at the right moment to become real. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, something new breathed. Something that had no name yet but was learning to be itself with every heartbeat, every bond, every choice made with eyes open and something real underneath. Something that had just begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.